Hello everyone, welcome back to my book channel. If you're already a subscriber, thank you so much for your support. If you love BookTube and you get most of your book recommendations from YouTube videos like I do, or you like having a book video running in the background while you do your makeup in the morning or do the dishes or tidy up, then you should consider subscribing to this channel. I would love your support and leave me a comment because I love hearing about what people are reading and their thoughts about the books that I talk about. In February, I read 6 books and most of them I gave a 4-star rating, so I had a really fantastic reading month. The first book I finished was a historical fiction book from Gablé. It's called Deconista Poponstadt, which is a German book. So I don't think there is a translation in English out, unfortunately, which is really such a bummer because I would love to recommend Rebecca Gablé's books to the whole world, but unfortunately we're limited by language. But if you are a German speaker, then I would highly recommend to check out her work, because if you're into English history or just historical fiction in general, her books are really engaging and suspenseful. Der König der purpurnen Stadt translates to the King of the Crimson City, which is London, which is where the story takes place mainly. In this book, we follow Jonah Durham, a merchant in 14th century England. He actually starts out as an apprentice with his cousin Rupert Hillock, which Rupert is not a good person. His wife and him make Jonah's life really hard. They cannot accept that he's about to become a more successful merchant, and Jonah has to develop a really thick skin to get through his apprentice years. And this book spans a few decades, so we see him as an apprentice, but then he grows up to be his own merchant, running his own company. We see him going through personal growth. Obviously, there's a little bit of romance in that story, but most of the book is about his actual merchant work because he is in the textile guild. He procures and sells fabric, and one day by chance he makes an encounter with the now English but Flemish Queen Philippa. She's the wife of King Edward, which those two people actually did exist. So what Rebecca Gablé does is she makes up these fictional characters like Jonah, and then she kind of weaves their stories into actual historical happenings. So Queen Philippa actually did in real life in the 14th century really push the textile industry in England, which led to a big financial help in the war against France in that time. Not only is Jonah going to deal with his personal business and his life, but also he's going to be wrapped up in political intrigues between the king and the queen and a lot of other lords and merchants in that time. This is a fantastic book that is really intriguing. It is quite a long book. I think is it 900 or 600 pages? I keep forgetting, but it's a quite big book, but you fly through it because the writing is just so easy to read. If you are interested in a historical story that spans decades of a character's life, then definitely check out this book in particular, but any other work by Rebecca Gablé is pretty nice. So I gave this book 4 stars. Then I finished A Sky Beyond the Storm by Sabaa Tahir. This is the 4th and final installment of the An Ember in the Ashes series. I'm not going to go into book details for this one because it's a continuation of the series and I don't want to give any spoilers. So instead I'm just going to tell you about An Ember in the Ashes. This is a Roman-inspired fantasy series. We follow Laia from Sarah. She and her family and the group of people she belongs to live in an oppressed state. So their world is ruled by an emperor, and the military has a very strong position in this world. And in the beginning of the first book, her brother is captured by the government, left completely on her own. She doesn't know what to do, so she seeks out the rebels and then makes a deal with them. She has to infiltrate Blackcliff Academy for the rebels to gather information as a slave, and in exchange the rebels will help to free Laia's brother. That's the academy where the strongest, most lethal, dangerous military personnel is being groomed, and that's where she meets Elias. He is a Blackcliff Academy student, and by a series of very unfortunate events, they form a connection. A huge portion of the story revolves around Laia and Elias and other people in this universe that form connections and relationships. So the issue I have is that this series is quite romance forward, and at the same time the fantasy portion and the world building came a little bit short because there's just so much of time spent on interpersonal relationships. And I think this is just how my taste evolved over the years. Maybe I would have liked this a lot when I was a bit younger, but now if I want to read a fantasy book, I really want to be submerged in the world and the political intrigues and the magic. And the fourth and final book kind of wraps up what I liked and what I didn't like about this whole series. The moments that I appreciated in the book were either the interpersonal, like romantic scenes whenever characters would come together and something changes in their relationship and they have these like big talks, or when something just really gruesome happens. But everything else in between, so the whole world building, the fantasy, and how the story progressed was kind of meh for me. I think that the Commandant was a great villain because her actions were just completely gruesome. A very ambitious woman, she knows what she wants and nothing's getting in her way. But at the same time, her backstory is kind of weak, and I don't think that she deserved the wrap-up of the story that she got in the fourth book. I thought it was a little rushed and weak. I would have expected something more grand and much bigger for her. And the same thing goes for the other supervillain in the story, because we keep reading about how powerful this person is, but the end is just very, very fast and seems kind of cliche almost. For me personally, Helene was my favorite character to follow. I thought that she had a great growth throughout the books. I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars, which makes this book the weakest out of all the books that I read this month, because this is a very enjoyable book series. It is not the best fantasy series in YA for me personally, but I can definitely see why a lot of people love it, and there's been so much hype around it. I do think it deserves it, but it's just not hitting the right notes for me anymore. I do think that if I had picked this up when I was a little younger, maybe at 16 or 17, I would have eaten this up, especially the romance parts. Then I read Evil Under the Sun by Agatha Christie. This book was quite a short read. I think it's under 300 pages. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. In this story, we have our beloved Belgian detective Poirot, who goes on a nice island in England to go on a vacation. It's a secluded island where we have one big hotel, we have different beaches, we have caves and tennis courts. While hanging out at the beach, he starts to mingle with some of the tourists. Some are English, some are from America. And one day, one of these tourists is found dead on the beach. In classic Agatha Christie or Poirot fashion, throughout the story you get breadcrumbs here and there where you can try to piece together what happened to this person, who's the murderer, why were they murdered. And I don't think this is a spoiler when I say it, because this is just kind of Agatha Christie's writing style and how her books are wrapped up, but it's always in the end when Poirot sits down with all the other people and then explains what happened. So basically he pierces the story together in his head, and you as the reader don't necessarily follow every single step and how he makes the conclusions. I would almost call it an older style of storytelling in crime novels, because in more modern or recent written crime novels or thrillers, you are right there with the protagonist, or for example with a detective when they're discovering new developments in the solution of the crime. You are with them when they find evidence and discover secrets. Contrary to that, I recently watched Alfred Hitchcock's Rebecca, and towards the end of the movie you have a scene where multiple characters sit in a room, and that is when one of the characters reveals a huge part of the backstory, and that's kind of how Agatha Christie books are set up as well, which I think is very interesting and different to more recent books, and I really enjoy them. I have a few more Agatha Christie books in my bookshelf, which is the new one, by the way. That's the old one in the background, and I hope to read at least one of them in this month. Next, I read a book which I ended up giving a 5-star rating. It is The Turn of the Key by Ruth. Ware. This book took me completely by surprise. I did not expect to give this book the highest rating. I am planning on filming an individual book review video for this one, so I'm not going to go into too many details, but you should watch out for that if you want to know why I gave it 5 stars, but in maybe other circumstances it would have been a 3-star read. It's about an English woman in her 20s who moves to Scotland to be a live-in nanny with a family. And this whole book is basically a letter from her to a lawyer, and at the time when she is writing the story or the letter, she's actually in prison for murder. So she tells the story of what exactly happened, what led to the death of one of the children that she had to take care of, and what the house, which is, by the way, a smart house, had to do with it. It's very suspenseful. It kept me guessing until the end. So if this sounds remotely interesting to you and you want to know if she's innocent or not, I encourage you to pick up this book. If you're not convinced yet, then watch out for my book review. Then I read The Scent Keeper by Erica Bauermeister. This book was brought to my attention by Reese Witherspoon's book club. It was one of the picks from last year or a year prior, and one day I saw it on sale on Book Outlet, so I just decided to go for it, and I really loved it. And again, I was completely surprised by how much I liked this book. We're following a young girl called Emmeline. She grows up on a secluded island just with her father. She never met any other person, be it child or adult, in her life. She's only ever known her father and the world through his stories. You don't really know how this happened, but Emmeline and her father seem to live a very fulfilled life. They embrace the nature they live in. They live off whatever they can find and grow on the island itself. And although she doesn't attend a school, she learns everything that she needs to know from her father, who is a scientist. One day, something big happens. Her world is flipped upside down, and that is how the story picks up. As the title suggests, the main theme in this book is scent. It is the most important element, and you really go into how scent can carry memories and emotion. I was quite taken aback by how much I was immersed into the stories and how much I cared for all the characters, because first of all, the writing is quite flowery. It's very descriptive, especially when it comes to scents and surroundings, which that kind of writing style is a huge hit or miss for me. I've read books like that before that just, they weren't for me. But with this book, I found the lyrical writing style very complimenting and just really fit the mood of the setting. And secondly, this book is quite a short read. It doesn't give you a lot of time with the characters, but even in this short time, the author really achieves for you as the reader to feel for the characters and care for them. By the end of the book, I was really rooting for Emmeline. I wanted to see her happy, and I think you should give it a go as well. I gave this book 4 stars. I subtracted 1 star just because I thought the ending was a little abrupt. I would have loved a little bit more time to see where things lead in the end. And lastly, I ended the month on a very, very high note. I finished The Tall by Neal Shusterman. This is a YA dystopian novel. And before you get turned off by the word dystopian because you feel like you've been there, you've done that with Hunger Games and whatnot years ago, I think you should stop that thought and just give this book series a go. This has to be my favorite dystopian book series out of everything that I've read in that genre. So if you still haven't read this book and you're still hesitating, be this message the last push for you to just finally pick it up, because I think it's worth it. If it's not, you can just still DNF the book. And again, because this is the 3rd book, I won't go into too many details for the plot summary on this one. Instead, let me tell you what Scythe is about. So the author flips the concept of a dystopian world upside down, basically. You're transported into the future that is the perfect world. Scientists have conquered death, illnesses, wars, poverty, famine. There's basically no problems in the world whatsoever. Life is perfect. You don't have to die. If you grow old, you can do what they call turn the corner and just reset your age back to whatever age you want to. You can be 20 again, you can be 40 again, for as long as you want, basically. But because nobody dies of natural causes or any kind of cause anymore, there is the danger of overpopulation now. And for this reason, the Scythe Dome exists. Scythes are the most honorable people that you can find in this world. They are there to kill people, to balance out the population. Everybody has the biggest, utmost respect for scythes. And the story starts with a girl named Citra suddenly becoming an apprentice of a scythe. And the magic of this book series, and what really, really is fascinating, is that even in the most perfect world, something still brings out the worst in humanity. be that greed or entitlement and power hunger. So specifically in the Tall, obviously we keep following our characters and the story develops further, but there's going to be special attention to the Thunderhead. The Thunderhead is an omnipresent AI. Anything under the sun is controlled by the Thunderhead, but not in a tropey way where it suddenly turns against humanity. It's programmed to help out the people and regulate anything that could cause an irritation in the population. So in the final installment, the Thunderhead is one of the things that this book focuses on. And there's two other things that I found really interesting in the last book. The first being the social commentary that Neal Shusterman put in this book. I thought it was at times quite hilarious. I want to read you a quote that just really made me laugh. Person A says, "We're exploring the possibility of building a wall to stem the exodus." Person B answers, "Don't be ridiculous. Only idiots build walls." And secondly, the place that religion takes in this book was very interesting. You won't find any religion that exists in our world in that book, but there's something in there that mirrors it. And from that topic, we explore cults. This book was a complete page turner. I really, really enjoyed it, and I think you will too. The only reason I gave this one 4 stars instead of 5 stars like the 2 books before is because I think the pace in this one was a little slower and not always to the story's benefit. I think this book wrapped up all the storylines pretty well. I liked the ending. It pretty much answered all of my questions. For me, this is a book trilogy done completely right. Every single book in this series had something to say. It brought value to the trilogy. It left you with wanting to read more, and even after the final book, I wouldn't mind if there would be a 4th book. I read somewhere that the rights were sold for Scythe to become a movie, which, to be honest, I'm a little skeptical. I would much rather prefer a Netflix show or any kind of TV show with multiple episodes because there's so many things to explore in the story. I think a movie would cut the story and the details short, but we'll judge that when the time comes. So again, if you still haven't picked up Scythe, it is well worth your time. That concludes the 6 great books I read last month. Thank you so much for sticking with me throughout the video. If you liked this video, I will definitely post more videos like this, so you should definitely subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!